Today we're going to see if we should buy or borrow Joshua Weissman's An Unapologetic Cookbook. This is the cover of Joshua Weissman's An Unapologetic Cookbook, and that's Josh in the middle. If you don't know who he is a YouTuber with a channel that has millions of subscribers, and I'll have his cookbook linked below if you want to check it out after this video. So the first section is his table of contents. So his table of contents is super interesting because he splits it up by a little cooking foundation and then foundations applied. So the cooking foundations are because he's trying to teach you how to make pickles and nut butters and cheese. And then he wants you to take all that stuff that you learn over here and then apply it to all of his other recipes that he has in the cookbook. Now, if you don't know anything about Josh, his personality is very bold, very much like this page in the cookbook. It's very eccentric, and you definitely see a lot of that in his writing as well throughout the whole cookbook. So if you don't know who he is, I definitely would watch a few videos on his YouTube channel before checking out this cookbook, but this also kind of, gives you an idea of what you're in for. So in the foundations applied section, like we talked about earlier, he has all of these different techniques for like pickling, and then how to make lacto fermented vegetables or jams, nut butters, basic stock, which I also feel like is super valuable to have in a cookbook because once you learn how to make stock, you can use it for a base of a lot of different things. So it's cool that he has like a pho broth, a beef stock, a pork stock, chicken stock, and even a dashi. And then there is also a section on sourdough starter. Now, one of Josh's claim to fame on the internet is being able to teach everyone how to make sourdough. One of his most popular recipes is his sourdough starter, or at least how to make sourdough. And so I think he even alludes to that in some of his language in the cookbook. So it's nice that it's in here. It kind of is a nod to his original YouTube days. And while it's not a bread cookbook, there is still, basic sourdough, a couple more loaf recipes, which is nice if you're interested in learning to make bread. And then we have the foundations applied section. Now in this foundations applied section, I do feel like there are some recipes that don't provide as much value, like perfect soft boiled eggs. This doesn't, to me, really provide any added value because you're really just learning how to boil eggs. If that's something that you need to learn how to do, you're better at following a recipe, this might be super helpful for you, but it's not the only recipe like this. This one's just a brown butter basted fried egg. There's cinnamon toast, which, yes, you'll make the bread for the cinnamon toast, but essentially you're making toast and adding butter and cinnamon on it. However, there are other ones that some people might find value out of, like this cheese board, but to me, this is kind of a bit of an assembly. If you do follow a lot of his recipes and you make the cheese, you make the pickles, it's a nice idea to be able to put all of it together, but I do feel like there could have been better recipes that could have taken up space in this cookbook versus some of the ones I just showed you. However, he does have some recipes that I find super interesting, like this one for chicken nuggets. I feel like, at least in America, chicken nuggets are something that's very commonly bought in the frozen section of a grocery store. So it's kind of nice that he gives you a recipe for how to make them on your own. And he has a bunch of sauces in his cookbook that are super approachable. So you can make the chicken nuggets, you can make some homemade sauce, and I feel like it's a nice use of what he really intends the cookbook to be used for. He also has this recipe for cubanos, which I feel like is a perfect example of what he's really trying to accomplish here. Because he doesn't just tell you how to make the meat for the cubano, he tells you how to make literally every ingredient. The bread, the meat, the pickles. It's super cool that this recipe allows you to lean on the cookbook fully. Obviously, it's gonna take time to make all of that, but it's not common in a cookbook for you to learn how to make quite literally every single ingredient, especially if it's something like a sandwich. So that's a nice use of what the cookbook is intended for. I feel like his soup section really popped off. So I feel like the roasted garlic mushroom soup with garlic chantilly cream is just something I want, honestly, right now. I definitely need to make this one. And I don't know how he did it, but this photo is beautiful, and I feel like brown food is definitely very hard to make look good, but this photo is gorgeous and the recipe seems great. But even still, you know, he's got French onion soup, and he even breaks down how to caramelize onions, which I think is important because that's kind of a hard thing to do. And there's also a beef pho, a chicken tortilla soup, ramen, and he teaches you how to make the pork for the ramen, which is pretty cool. A tomato soup, even a gazpacho, and my personal favorite, an egg drop soup. But on the contrary, I feel like the dessert section was lacking a little. It is always nice to have a chocolate cake recipe that you really like, but I feel like overall this section wasn't as interesting as some of his other sections in the cookbook. There are sticky buns, a key lime pie, and then there's this banana hot fudge sundae, but the only thing you're really making in this recipe is the salted fudge sauce. So it's kind of unfortunate it's all the way in the back because I feel like I would want to, you know, end the cookbook with a couple good recipes, and I don't think that that's one I would necessarily take a cookbook out to make. He's got an ultimate chocolate chip cookie recipe and some coffee ice cream. And then he has a tiramisu recipe. But overall, I feel like the cookbook has a nice clean look and feel, which I would assume is kind of a nod to fine dining, and also a nice contrast to Josh's eccentric style. But let's cook this book.
The recipe that I'm going to test today is for English muffins. Now, I've never made English muffins before, so I'm going to see how easy these instructions are to follow, and then at the end, we'll taste it and see what I think. Okay, step one, I'm already a little bit thrown off. It says that we need to heat some water so that way we can bloom our yeast, but it doesn't really say how to heat it. So I think we're gonna do a double boiler. I wasn't sure if I could just put it directly on the stove because I didn't want to kill the yeast by cooking it too much by accident. So we'll try a double boiler and see what happens. I switched spots because the other one doesn't work on my induction. I forgot. It says 1 tablespoon of yeast, but the 3 packets say that they all equal 21, and so that would make this 9 grams, and it says 1 tablespoon or 9 grams, but this isn't a tablespoon. It's not filled all the way. I feel like you should have just said 9 grams, and then I would have measured it out, or used like a packet of yeast. So we're gonna go with 1 packet because according to the yeast I bought, it says it's 9 grams. Let's see. I don't know if that kills it. I feel like I just try it again. We're gonna try this again. Just gonna do it. This doesn't look foamy, but I did it to 100 degrees, so I don't know. These are all the English muffins I got. I feel like the second roll was not as good. They were really easy to cut and the dough seemed perfect after the first roll, but then when I put it back together, it was kind of like, it felt like I was overworking the gluten, which wouldn't really make sense because he says to do exactly that. So we'll see if there's a difference between the first set of English muffins and then after I roll them out. Okay, it is sometime in the future. Our English muffins have risen. They're all puffed up, so let's cook them. They're giving pancakes. They seem a little flat. Maybe we'll try some of the other ones. Oh, I need to turn that heat down. These ones seem a little bit more puffed, so let's see if maybe like this one is better. I'll try one from over here, maybe like this one. I've decided that I am going to take the remaining ones I have besides these two and put them all on one tray and then put them in the oven to try and proof a little longer. I let these proof extra long, so it really should have been fine, but that's my only guess, is that maybe they're not puffed up enough. Okay, so here are all of the English muffins that I made. I put the rest of the dough back in the oven just to prove, because that's warm space. Because I tried the towel method, I think that went well the first time, but then on the second proof, it doesn't seem like they got puffed enough. And then he recommended just putting another baking sheet on top of your baking sheet if you have two of the same size, which I did, and I just feel like it did not work as well as I would have liked. I also think there's a chance I didn't make them thick enough, but then I'm not sure, because I mean, I feel like I just thought that they were gonna puff up in the pan. Because they got wider, not taller, so I thought that was what was gonna happen. So I think this is a pretty good one to try. Let's see how it tastes. Okay, so the one that was puffed up a bunch is so dense on the inside. There is like no aeration whatsoever. So my guess is again that they just didn't proof enough, which is like kind of surprising because I feel like it proofed fine the second time, or the first time, so. But I'll give it a try. I did not make my own butter, which he does recommend because he has a recipe for butter. So just bought some good flaky salt crusted French butter, so. Honestly, flavor-wise, this is really good. I definitely would like to see if there's any more advice online, or if you have any advice for making English muffins about how to get that aeration, because it's really just not that clear. All in all, the instructions were kind of hard to follow. I feel like there were a few moments where I was like, what is he trying to say? Especially when I was cooking them. It says that if they start to brown too quickly, to flip them, which is totally fine, but like, do I need to cook both sides? Like, is the top gonna be browned, or is it gonna just remain pale? I just wasn't really too sure on that. I think that it's organized well, but there could have been some more tips and tricks, especially for a first timer. Like, what happens if your dough doesn't proof enough? How do you know? I mean, they puffed up, they were clearly expanded, but it obviously wasn't enough. So I'll try the recipe again, or try with the extra proof dough and hope that this third proof is enough, but at least they taste good. Oh, I bit my tongue. So, should we buy or should we borrow? I wanna say borrow. I feel like, for me particularly, this cookbook doesn't add as much value to my cookbook collection as I would like. I don't think there's a lot of recipes in here that I would gravitate to or want to make more than once. But if you're a Joshua Weissman fan, or if you're curious and learning more about the fundamentals and then applying it in this particular style, it could be really great for you to have it in your collection. Personally, I think there's a couple recipes in here that I definitely will keep trying out, but I don't think that there's enough for me to warrant a full, spot on my bookshelf. I also feel like because there were so many recipes that were kind of not full recipes, like the egg or the charcuterie board or things like that, I think it was a bit less valuable than other cookbooks that I have in my collection. So go to your library, pick it up, see what you think, and if you like it more than me, then buy it. But for now, that's all I've got. See you soon.